All right, y'all. Now we're going to get in there and download Unity. And if you don't have it at home, this is what you need to do. If you have it already, then you can skip this step real quick. It's real fast. You need to make an account. You have to log into Unity. And it's interesting that it logged me back out again. There, now I'm back in. Then you're going to go to your Unity. If you don't have this right in the beginning, you can go to download to Unity and it'll give you this screen right here. And inside of there, you can go to older versions because we can't use 3.5. We have to use 3.0, and then you're just going to say download win. All right. So that's how you get to Unity. And after you do that, you're going to install it. And after you install it, you're going to open it up. So when you open it up, it's going to sit here. Yours is going to be pretty empty inside of here. You may have nothing. You may have some standard one. And what you're going to do is new. And then you're going to name this, and I will name this VGA1, just like that. And then I need to tell it where I want to save it. So this is key. If you're at home, you want to make sure you save it not on your big drive. If you can, your main drive, you want to save it on a secondary drive. I save it into my ACC classes Unity folders for this projects. And then I just say select that folder that we're in, and I say create project. So everything should be working, and I will pause it for a minute while it opens. It's going to load your stuff. Your stuff is going to take a long time to load. I guess I'm not. Wait, see, I'll do this over and over again. Okay, so what we're looking at here, let's go over some of the stuff inside of here. So you've created a file. This is called a project, and if you look up here, you'll see there's open project and open scenes. If I say open project, it's going to go to these. That's cool. That's not what we're looking for. If we aren't going to really be looking for anything, but what you are going to have in here is maybe the sample scene. Scene is like a level in a game. This is how games are made. We have everything broken into pieces, and a scene is that level, is a level. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the interface inside of here. So the first interface I want to point you out to is project. This little tab right here, and you can see you can press X or you can click on it and go into that tab. And then the cool thing about these tabs is you can multiply them. You get to go in here and say add tab and add more, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The next thing, and then you're going to see inside of here is the main game folder. Anytime you work inside of Unity, it's going to be inside of the assets folder. Now, there can be a whole different structure to that folder, but when you bring stuff into the game, it has to be brought into the assets folder. It can't go outside of it. So when it made this assets folder for me, let me show you what it did inside of my Windows Explorer here. If I go to that drive and I go to ACC classes and I go to Spring, no, actually I'll just go to Unity. Go to Unity and you'll see that there's a VGA1 class, and I should date modify the opposite there. Look inside of here, there's assets, and then there's a library and a bunch of other stuff. We don't have to worry about that, but if we go inside of assets, all that's in there is scenes, as you can see right here. If I go inside of scenes, you'll see there's a sample scene, and you'll see these metas. What a meta is inside of Unity is a text file, and you can actually open it with a Word doc. And all it's doing is telling me some information about the folder or the file or whatever. So you'll always see everything having a duplicate of this. And sometimes they don't show up until you press play, but a lot of the folders do it right from the beginning. So anything outside of this assets folder, including inside of here, is not part of the game. And I love how it does that. So anything that's not inside of the VGA1 assets folder is not going to be part of the game, and when we mean part of the game, it means it won't show up in the game. So you have to have all the textures and models and everything inside of the same place. Changing stuff inside here changes what gets looked at to be built in the game. Now there's more to being built, and what happens with the game is we make a bunch of stuff inside of here, and then with all the assets at full compression at the way we bring them in, and then the computer or the Unity system will compress it down. It's called building. It'll check all the code against each other. It'll check every aspect of it, and it'll build the whole game. And it can even make us an executable and all that stuff too. If you make a change inside of this folder, it makes a change through the game. And if it builds and it's used in the game, it'll use that. It'll calculate that too. So the cool thing about Unity is I can make changes here. So I'm just going to, for right now, Control D to duplicate it. And if I look at that, I see there's sample scene 1 and now sample scene. If I go back to my Windows Explorer folder, I can see if I go inside of VGA1 Assets Scenes, and there's Sample Scene 1 and Sample Scene the other one. And it's also made these meta files are always .meta. So that also goes backwards too. I can take these two and delete them out of my Windows Explorer, and if I come over here and look inside the scene folder, it's gone too. That can be great. That can be awesome. It also can be very, very breaky. So you got to be careful when you do that. If you're at home, it's fine, but if you're working with a bunch of people, you're going to have some kind of way to make sure you don't overwrite anything that somebody else does, for example. All right. So first thing we should do, anytime you start a game, if you don't have these set up for you, or anytime you start working inside of an engine, if you don't have this set up for you, what you need to do is set up a folder system. So we're going to go straight into the assets folder, and this is the way I've set them up in the past. So this is the way we're going to do it in here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say create folder, and in that folder it's going to say, I'm going to call it art assets. Just like that. So anything that now is art is going to be dropped into this folder is the idea. You can also right click if you want and look at this. I can right click here and say show in Explorer, and it'll open up a Windows Explorer with that for me. Okay, which is very handy, by the way. Okay, so we also need to think, not only do we only have art in here, just simple art, but we're going to have different key areas split out besides art. So we might have scenes like this, or we might have things like programs or AIs or meta, and just tons of random stuff. And in fact, what I've done is I pulled up an example of how a game I worked on recently has their setup going with their permission. I already talked to them. And this is how they have it. Assets, you see, that's the same, but then they go down, and inside of the assets, they have a game folder, and inside of the game folder is where they start breaking out everything. And then they come back out, and you can see that besides that, there's also middleware, plugins, standard assets, streaming assets, just a bunch of other stuff, and we're actually going to import this too for ourselves. But, you know, the idea is that we need to find a way to organize all this stuff the best way you can. And the company you work for is more than likely going to have their own system, or your lead will have the system and they work with the other teams, because an art team has its own lead, and each lead may be an environment lead, a character lead, a prop lead, and they may each have their own folder set up. But it depends on the company. Some companies like to have all the art assets and all the model files in one major place. We have a lot of control in this case, so we're just going to do it this way. Art assets, and then we're going to right click in here and say create folder, and we're going to name this first folder environments, and I can spell. There we go. And then we're going to go create again folder, and we're going to call, actually, you know what, I'm not going to do that yet. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to push delete and delete it. All good. So I'm going to go to environments, and inside of here I'm going to go and create a new folder. And inside that folder, I'm going to go materials, and then I'm going to create one more folder called, and I pushed enter, but you can rename them really easy, textures. Okay, so now I have I have a materials and a textures folder. Now, textures and materials need to be named correctly for later in the build. Now, what a lot of companies do is they also make a geometry folder. We're going to call the environment folder the default geometry folder. So any geometry we bring to the game, it's going to go in here. One of the reasons we do that is because if we have these two folders inside of it, when we create geometry, it's going to want to put the materials here and the textures there for us. And if it doesn't, at least we know where the materials for the environment always go. This is a simple version of it. So what instead of taking and rebuilding that, and I do everything as best I can to save the amount of steps I have. So art assets, instead of making a new folder and making two new folders in it, I'm just going to push Control D, which is a duplicate button. And I'm going to say inside of here, I'm going to call it characters, and overwrite the name of environment. So now I have a characters folder with materials and textures in it. Great. And then what I could do inside here actually is sometimes what we do, and for me, I know more about this, and there could be definite settings, is we do and we create a new folder. Actually, you know what? I'm thinking. Sorry, guys. I'll create a new folder, and we'll call this Heroes. I guess there's E there. There we go. And inside of there, I'm going to take these two materials and this texture, and I'm just going to click and drag them so they highlight the Heroes folder into that folder. Now these two have that material. So what I would do next is, again, just like I did with characters for environment, I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to Control D to duplicate it, and this one I'm going to call mobs, which are your monsters. Then I'll do it one more time and say bosses, for example. Okay, so now I've got all my folders for all my key characters, and we could even add more and more. But in each side of the inside of each of them, I have materials and textures. Now, I could have put the materials and textures just in folders, and then if I had 100 or 500 or tons of different sub characters, it would all be fighting for the material folder. And the reason you want to have these as segmented as you can, but not completely complicated, is because if you have a bunch of characters, each character is going to have 5 textures per part, so it can get really deep for the texture part. So you want to make sure you keep that in a way that you can keep it clean. Oh, I just remembered, sometimes in the beginning of it, it's set up like this. If you see big folders like this, I actually work with them down like a list because it's just the way I think. Okay, so now I've got characters with bosses, heroes, and mobs. And now we're going to come into environments, and we've got our materials and textures. And we could do a few more folders, but we don't really need them. We're just doing this for the example purposes. Okay, so that's our project folder. And what I like to do is I like to duplicate that. So I'm going to say Control, I'm going to right click on the tab, I'm sorry, and say, guess I got to click on the tab though, and say, it's very interesting, Add tab. My brain keeps looking for copy, but it's Add tab. So I just go in here and I come down to where it said Project, and I click that, and now I've got 2 tabs, and they fight for it. Well, the cool thing is I'm going to take this one and move it over here. And the reason I do that is it allows me to do something that you'll see comes in quite handy. It allows me to lock it, and you'll see this one already is locked. So whenever I click on something, it only goes to that folder. But you'll see over here, and if I go ahead and do this, you'll see over here, whenever I click on a folder and click on this, it's going to go straight to there. This one is flying as I change, and this one stays only to what I do. You'll see it'll come in handy in a few minutes. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is hierarchy. Hierarchy is up here. Hierarchy is everything that's in the game level right here or here is inside of here. If it's being seen in the scene, it has to be in this area right here. We're going to come back to how that works when we put stuff in there, but for now, this is where the hierarchy happens. This is where all the objects that are in this shot will be. Let's talk about these 2 shots. We have scene, which is where you can manipulate stuff. So I can like grab this camera and move it, or I could grab this sunlight and move it. Or if let's see, I'll just do this. I'll add create, oops, that's not what I meant. Add create 3D object, and we'll call it a plane. And then now I've got a plane in there, and you'll see it says plane, and I can rename the plane and all that stuff. This over here is what the camera sees. So right now, if I look at it, ignoring the icon, because I hate the icon and how it works, ignoring that icon, it is showing me the stuff in this direction. If I lift this up, you'll see there's my plane. That's the view, and you can see it showing it down here too. This is one of those ones I actually put right on top of each other, just like that. And then I can jump back to the scene and see what I'm looking at. Okay, so that's the scene, and this is the camera view, and there you go there. All right. Next, let's talk about the inspector. in the inspector is whatever we select shows up in this view. Now, it doesn't matter if we select it in the project folder or if we select it in the environment or the hierarchy folder. So if I select this, this is the information about that. If I select that directional light, here's the information about that. If I selected something inside of here, it would show me the information about that. It would actually show me the import information, which will come in handy in a bit. So we've got the game, what's in the game. We have what's in the scene, which you get from this game. Whatever's in here definitely has to be in here. And then we get what those specific things you have selected do. Okay. This is another one that I will duplicate. Add tab, and I say inspector, and I drag it so it's two of them right next to each other. This allows me to lock one, and this comes in handy later. I was going to show you the light tab, but I'm going to hold off on that. It's not default out here anymore. We have to open it up. We're going to do lighting on the next class. So the inspector shows us what we want. The hierarchy is what's in the scene. The project is what's in the game. Pretty straightforward. The view is what, or the scene is what we see, and the game is what the camera sees. You can't move anything in the game, by the way. I can't manipulate the sun, say, in the game. So the game is just what the camera is going to be doing, and that's fine. So when you want to import something into Unity, it's as easy as you may think. So what I'll do is... Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to import those materials. We're going to import the objects that we made and we exported and everything from Substance into here. And I'm not going to bring it into the characters. I'll just bring it into the environments for now. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do, there's a couple ways you can do it. If you export something out of Max straight into here or export something out of ZBrush straight into here, it can sometimes drag the textures with it, embed everything, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to open this one up here. I'm going to grab these textures, copy, and I'm going to come over to where this file is, like we're working in. Actually, dummy. I'm going to come over to these textures and drag them right into here. So these are the textures I just got out of Substance, so we'll talk about that. So if I go into the textures folders, here are all those textures I had. Now watch what happens when I click on them. My properties change now because I locked it. Only one of my properties changed. We don't need this one, but right now it just changed this property. So it tells me all the little information, and by default we're going to leave it normal. The only thing I want you to see is that the normal, speaking of leaving it normal, is not set to be a normal. So if I click on this and I say change it to a normal map and then say apply, it'll fix it. But I don't want to do that just because I want to show you that if you forget to do it, don't panic. It's fine. You'll get another chance. So the next thing I want to do is, again, open up this file here, come outside of here, and just throw super low crate FBX into the base geometry or the environment folder, which is where I keep my geometry. So I'm going to say like that. I'll go to the environment. Now I have super low crate, and I have the textures it's going to be wanting right there. Well, let's take a look and see what super low crate did when I click on it. If I click on it, its properties has a bunch of, and yours should be at model. There's a lot of little things that aren't needed in here, but we're fine. We're going to leave it the way it is, and then we're going to jump over to materials. Now, what happened somewhere in 2017, they decided to embed all the materials, and we don't like that. What that means is that if I select this object, I can see the material that it's using on this object. That's great, but I can't, as you can tell, it's all grayed out. I'm still befuddled by why they did this, but they did. So there's a couple of things we can do to fix it. First thing we can do to fix it is come in here and say embedded materials and say use external. They did it so they could have less materials, okay, and less clutter. But use external materials legacy, and click on that, and then we say apply. And suddenly that material's gone, but where did it go? It didn't just put it right out here. Remember how I told you before it was important that everything was named correctly? Well, if I look inside of here, there is that material. If I select that material, oh, I missed. If I select that material, I can now see it's not grayed out anymore. Perfect, right? So let's take a look at a couple things here. I'm going to come down here to the environment object. I'm going to select it. You notice this thing down here? This allows you to view your object, and right now it's all gray. I don't really use this very often, but it's there if you do want to see it before you put it in game. We're just going to throw the crate in game, just like that. We know it's got materials, and if you look at it in here, it's not grayed out anymore. And we know that it's 1 by 1 by 1, or it should be the right size. So where did it go? Well, when I look at the object in here, this is what I see. When I look at the object in the hierarchy, I see the information about the object in the game space. So if I look up here, I can see it's at 0, 0, 0, 0. And for whatever reason, the plane is not. So I'll just move the plane down. So the plane, if I look at it up here, is at 0. Okay, and I should be able to just do 0 tab, 0 tab, 0 tab, and then drag it down probably point. I have to do negative 0.5. Okay, so it should be exactly perfect on the ground there. If I come over here, you'll see there's the box. Now, I can select the box in here and see the materials. I can select the box in here and I can't see the materials. Okay, I could select the materials though and change them in here, and it would change them on this. So the way it works is this object has this material attached to it. I can attach any material I want to it and change all the settings of that material, but by default, it's looking for that material. And once I break it out by default, it's going to be automatically looking for it. Let's go ahead and look at this one more time, and then this is the last time we're going to have to do this, but I'm going to look at the super low crate super low Z. And then I'm going to come over to here, and you can see all this stuff is set. It's done this. Now, I wish I could tell you that every time you import something, you won't have to do this, but by default, you do. So, Unity, in its wisdom, has allowed us to push this little slider button up here, and this is to bring up the preset button. And I'm going to call this Import Preset. And if I changed the stuff in the other shot, in the other tabs, it would keep these too. Oops. Like that. And then I'm going to say save to current. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. I'm just going to save it in art assets, so it's defaulted to the main place. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't look like it's going to do it. If I drop something else in here, it's still going to go back to the default way of doing it. So what's the deal? Well, here's the deal. I have to go right back out to art assets, and then you can see there's this little thing right here that says FBX importer, the thing we just named it. If we click on that, we get to see what it's talking about and the settings that it has. But right next to the name, right below the name FBX importer, we have FBX, set FBX importer as default. Now, from whenever I drop something into the game, it's going to lock it to make sure my materials are exported separately. And if I have my environment and my stuff set up, it's going to drop them into the folder that's right above them. So it's great. And you know, this is one of those things that I was happy to find. I think we had to script it a few versions ago. Anyway, so now the game is set like this. If I had exported it out of 3D Studio Max, the textures would be attached, but they aren't, and that's okay. I can either go to the materials like I told you before, or I can just go to the environment object. And if I turn this one off, actually leave that on, and just go to environments, I can leave that one there, and then I can go to materials and see that it didn't change it. So see, I can look at both of them at the same time. So, but I'm going to do it inside of here. It doesn't really matter where I do it as long as it gets changed. So I'll do it right here, grabbing this one, and I'll lock it. And just to show you, I'll grab this one and I'll lock it. So you can see that I can change it here, or I can change it here, and it'll be the same. The other thing I want to point out is when I exported it out of Max, it kept the color that what the box originally was. So we want to put that back to white. If you didn't export it out of Max, or you had a default color, it'll make it gray. One more thing, if you want to put, now let's do the material. So looking at this material, how do we change the material? Well, I'm going to go ahead and go to Crate, Textures, and inside Textures I've got albedo, I have a grayscale, which is my way I named it, but it should be AO. I have a height map, I have a metallic smoothness, and I have a normal map. So if I take this albedo and I put it right there, bam, and look, it changed it over there. And now our box in the game has the right lighting on it, or has the right textures on it, at least that part. And I can, again, rotate this, just turn it this way, take a better look at it over here. Okay. But right now, it doesn't have any normals on it. And now you can really tell that's just a texture. Okay. So I'm going to come to metallic and actually, you know what? We'll do normal next because I told you that you'll get another chance to fix the normal that you import in. So I'll grab that normal and I'll throw it into here. And then it comes up and it doesn't look quite right. Something's amiss. Well, if you look right here, you'll see it says this texture is not marked as a normal because remember when we selected it, it didn't say normal. It allows us to fix it on the fly. Bam, it fixed it. Okay, now everything's a little bit cleaner. We're getting all the information a lot better. Cool, so that's 2. Now we put metallic smooth and 3, and now we're good there. Look at that. And then we say grayscale for the occlusion and height for the height. And all you have to do to change these out, if you want to, you can either drag and put them over the top, or you can, if you want to get rid of them, you can just delete. The smoothness is defined by the object's metal smoothness map. So this is kind of a falsehood. We want to have it pretty high up there because it's going to calculate where that smoothness is supposed to be based on the material that gets out of here. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's the basics of Unity in a nutshell. And all I want you to do is import your objects in here and have the materials that we exported earlier. The other thing you want to do is if you press play, oh, I do want to show you one more thing. Press play besides this. When you press play, it automatically goes to your game view and it shows you the play. And since I have no controller over the camera, I haven't set it up or anything, it doesn't move. I can scale and zoom, but that zoom is a fake zoom if you can't tell. Here, let me come back out. And I do want to point out anything you change while you're in game mode, even while you're looking at the scene. Let me change this to that. And then I stop the game. Oh, they fixed it. Okay, it doesn't do that anymore. That's awesome. So you can change stuff and it'll apparently keep it. That's great news to me. Okay, because sometimes you can't tell what's going on until you see it playing. Anyway, so the last thing I want to show you is that I want to go over to the asset store. And the asset store is the default Unity control thing. And I want to grab one thing out of here so you understand how to do it. We're going to do it again probably on Thursday. But you're going to come in here to the asset store. And this is where you can find a bunch of free stuff. You can find a bunch of expensive stuff. You can do whatever you want. You can sell your stuff if you have copies of Macs or whatever that are sellable. So if you type in standard, and then you type in assets, space assets, like that, you see this little piece right here. And if I click on it, I see this. This is Unity's standard asset that used to come with it. They don't send it with it anymore. You have to buy them, import them separately. Now, mine's going to look a little bit different than yours because the great thing about Unity is once you have them on your hard drive, you don't have to download them again. They're saved in the Unity area. But since it's not in my game, I will have to import it. But what you're going to have to do is download them and then import. So I'm just going to go ahead and import. And your download's going to take a little bit longer too. And hopefully, yeah, it shouldn't take too long. And what you'll get after you download and then import is you're going to get a list of all the assets it's going to import into your game. And this is the reason I don't put them in there because a lot of people don't need all this stuff. But all this stuff is free and it's pretty decent asset stuff. So I'm going to say import. You can uncheck what you want if you get to that point. But for now, you're just going to say import. And it's going to import everything into your game. It's important you do it here at school for your level. And it's important you do it at home because the stuff that you import, if we use it, which we're going to, won't work at home if you don't have it imported there and won't work here if you don't have it imported here. Okay? So when you're working in Unity, you can come and import stuff. We can even go to another tab and keep going. Oh, I guess we can. That's right. Unity locks you. Used to not even have a bar, so we're very lucky. You import it in here, and now we're going to have all this stuff. And I'll tell you what I'll do, just to save some time. I will try and pause it. I'll be right back. And we're back, and it's done. So that's it. That's all I want you to do. And then let's go back to the scene, and I want to show you a couple things. Just real quick to have fun with. Now you have this new folder in here called Standard Assets. If you drop it down, you can see there's a bunch of stuff in here. One of the things that we played with in my first 3D class was we played with the particle systems. If you want to see what that looks like, just go to Particle Systems, Prefabs, or you go to Standard Assets, Particle System, Prefabs, and grab something like Fire. And turn off these gizmos. If I come up here to the scene world, I can see. Oh, the problem is. Let me see what's going on here. Sorry. It's never easy when you're trying to show something. You know what I'm going to do real quick too? I'm going to find that camera. And sometimes it doesn't show up down here, so this is where it's helpful to have it both next to each other, but I like to have as much view as I can. I'm going to pull it up, pull it down, pull it up, pull it down, maybe rotate a little bit, like that. Okay. So I wish it worked cleaner, but sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to do this. F is the shortcut for getting and zooming on stuff too, by the way. So if I select these flames, these fire, it's really weird. Huh. Let me take this off then. Let's do simple flame. What I will be. This is the strangest thing I've ever seen. Let me see if I play it, if it works. I mean, it's got to work when I play it. There it is. It's just really bright in here maybe, but let's take that light and turn these locks off and turn the strength to 0.5. There we go. Come back on here. I'm not sure. There it goes. I don't know why it was not doing it before. Okay, so there's the fire, and I can turn off the gizmo thing here. Select the outline. There we go. Or we can try the other light, the other fire now if we want. We can take this fire mobile. We can take the... Let's see. I think we did steam in the class. Like that. Or we could say drop. Let's just do fire complex. Let's see if it'll work now. Let's move it up. Oops, yeah. And there you go. Fire. All right, so that's all we have. That's what we're doing. That's what I'm looking for you for tomorrow. This is what you'll be turning in. You don't have to do the fire. You just have to put the crate in the scene. All right, I'll talk to you later.